The North Carolina sun was already punishing by the time Staff Sergeant Ryan Cole arrived at the firing range. The air shimmered with heat, the tongue of gunpowder thick enough to taste. Rows of soldiers were lined up, their rifles neatly stacked on the benches, helmets glinting in the morning glare. Another day, another rotation. Same base, same drills, same endless echo of gunfire. Ryan had seen it all before. 10 years in the Army had dulled his sense of surprise. New faces came and went. Each one thought they were tougher than the last. But that morning, something, or rather someone, shattered that monotony. At the far end of the range stood a woman. She was slight compared to the men around her, maybe 5'7", her hair tucked into a tight bun beneath her cap. A standard-issue uniform, scuffed boots, no ranked patches visible, nothing that made her stand out. Nothing except what she was holding. A Barrett M82, a 1.50 caliber rifle. That monster weighed 30 pounds unloaded, capable of sending a 50 BMG round through armor, vehicles, even walls. Most soldiers handled it like it was a punishment. But she handled it like it was home. Ryan paused mid-step, watching as she leaned into the bipod, her movements precise and deliberate. There was no wasted motion, no nervous adjustments. She was calm, almost too calm. "Who's that?" Ryan asked the corporal beside him, squinting downrange. The corporal shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. New transfer. Came in last week. Name's Reynolds. Some say she's here for observation duty. Observation duty? Ryan smirked. Then why's she on the long-range line with a Barrett? Before the corporal could answer, the sound hit, a thunderclap that rolled across the open field like a breaking storm. The Barrett kicked back, smoke curling from the muzzle. The recoil looked like it should have thrown her off balance, but she absorbed it smoothly, her body moving with the rifle like a rhythm she'd practiced for years. Seconds later, a faint metallic ding echoed from somewhere far, far downrange. Ryan's head snapped up, scanning the targets. "Holy hell," someone muttered. "That's the 1,800-meter plate." No one hit that plate. It was there mostly for morale, a distant dream at the end of the field. Even the instructors rarely tried it. But the sound was unmistakable. She'd nailed it. First shot, no hesitation. The range went silent. The officer in charge looked up from his clipboard, squinting in disbelief. "Reynolds, what's your background, soldier?" She turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable behind the shaded lenses of her glasses. "Just maintenance, sir," she said calmly. "I fix weapons." A few of the guys laughed under their breath, the nervous, uneasy kind of laughter that comes when someone witnesses something they can't explain. Ryan didn't laugh. He was too busy replaying what he'd just seen. She didn't even aim like anyone else. No twitch, no overcorrection. Just pure surgical control. The kind of control that only came from years behind a scope, from countless hours studying wind, gravity, and instinct. When the firing line reset, she moved to clean her rifle, stripping the Barrett with careful efficiency. Ryan found himself drifting closer, drawn by curiosity more than anything. Up close, he noticed her hands. Small, steady, the kind of hands you'd expect on a pianist, not a sniper. She caught him staring and looked up. "You need something, Sergeant?" Her voice was calm. Not cold, but measured, like someone who didn't waste words unless they mattered. Ryan cleared his throat. That was one hell of a shot. She gave a small shrug, wiping the barrel with a rag. Every rifle has a sweet spot. You just have to listen to it. "Listen to it?" Ryan echoed, half smiling. "Didn't know rifles talked." "They do," she said, setting the weapon down gently. "Most people just don't hear them." And with that, she walked away, leaving Ryan standing there with more questions than answers. That night in the barracks, the story spread like wildfire. A maintenance tech had just landed a perfect hit at 1,800 meters with a Barrett on her first try. Everyone had their own theory. Some said she was a sniper brought in for evaluation. Others claimed she was part of a special program. But when Ryan checked her personnel file in the system, it was nearly blank. Just Reynolds, R, with clearance levels above his pay grade. The next morning, he spotted her again. Same calm expression, same precise movements. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She wasn't even competing. She just moved with quiet focus, tuning the rifle, adjusting the optics, making mental notes like a scientist collecting data. At lunch, Ryan overheard two range officers whispering. "She's the one from Fallujah, isn't she?" "I don't know." The record says 3,247 meters. Longest confirmed in theater. That's not something you just forget. Ryan froze mid-bite. 3,247 meters. That wasn't possible. The longest shot he'd ever heard of belonged to elite snipers, legends, not mechanics. When he looked over at her across the mess hall, she was sitting alone, quietly eating. No patches, no medals, no sign of ego. Just stillness. He couldn't resist. He walked over. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, nodded once. They ate in silence for a minute before he finally said, "You made quite an impression yesterday." She didn't look up from her tray. "I wasn't trying to." "I can tell," he said. "That's what makes it impressive." For a brief second, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "People make noise. I prefer results." Ryan leaned back, studying her. There was no bravado in her tone, just quiet certainty. She wasn't someone trying to prove she belonged. She already knew she did. Later that week, during a weapons inspection, Ryan caught a glimpse of a faded patch inside her locker. It was old, desert tan, with a skull insignia and a single-stitched number, 3247. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. By then, he already knew the truth, or at least part of it. The woman who handled the Barrett like it was nothing wasn't just another soldier. She was a ghost, a legend walking among them in uniform, hiding in plain sight. That night, as the lights went out in the barracks, Ryan lay awake, replaying the shot in his mind. The sound, the precision, the calm. He'd spent his entire career chasing perfection with a rifle. She had become it. And for the first time in years, Ryan felt something new. Not envy, not pride, but respect. Deep, quiet respect for the soldier no one seemed to notice. The one whose story, he realized, was only just beginning. The rumor began like smoke. Thin, shapeless, impossible to catch. But by the time the week ended, it had drifted through every corner of Fort Bragg. "You hear about the new girl? The one with the Barrett? They say she made a 3,200-meter shot overseas." Ryan Cole heard it all. In the mess hall, in the locker room, even in the motor pool. Every conversation led back to her. The woman no one knew, the soldier who barely spoke, who could outshoot anyone without breaking a sweat. Reynolds. Ray, the ghost with the Barrett. Ryan didn't want to feed the gossip, but curiosity gnawed at him. The Army wasn't a place for myths. It was a machine built on numbers, reports, and ranks. But this woman, she didn't fit any of it. There was something in the way she moved, a quiet discipline that came from experience most soldiers only read about in field manuals. On Wednesday morning, during live fire drills, Ryan finally got the chance to watch her up close again. The squad was practicing long-range coordination, snipers and spotters working in tandem. Ray was paired with a young corporal who looked nervous just being beside her. "Take your time," she said softly, adjusting his spotting scope. "Breathe with the rifle, not against it." He missed the first two shots, shaking his head. "Don't chase the target," Ray continued calmly. "Let it come to you." Her tone wasn't harsh or commanding. It was quiet, like she'd said those words 1,000 times before, maybe to herself. On the third shot, the corporal hit dead center. His head snapped toward her, wide-eyed. She just nodded once. Better. Ryan watched from behind, arms crossed. She wasn't showing off, she was teaching. And she was good. Too good. After the session, he walked over. "You've done this before," he said, trying to sound casual. She looked up, squinting into the sunlight. "What makes you say that?" "The way you talk to shooters," he replied. "You don't sound like someone who read it in a manual." Ray wiped the sweat from her brow, setting the Barrett down gently. "Experience teaches faster than manuals." "Where'd you get your experience?" Ryan asked. She hesitated for half a second, just enough for him to notice. "Everywhere," she said finally, and walked away. That night, Ryan was in the NCO lounge when two older sergeants joined him, beers in hand. "You seen her shoot yet?" one asked. Ryan nodded. "Yeah, it's unreal." The second sergeant leaned in. "You ever hear the story from Iraq?" 2016. Sniper nest near Fallujah. Whole convoy pinned down by an enemy marksman. One of ours took the guy out from 2 miles away. Ryan's heart ticked faster. 2 miles? 3,247 meters to be exact, the man said, lowering his voice. Confirmed kill. Longest by an American at the time. They say the shooter was a woman, but the report was classified. Never released. Ryan's beer went warm in his hand. "You think it's her?" The sergeant shrugged. "I think legends don't end up in maintenance for no reason." The next morning, Ryan found her in the armory, cleaning rifles like always. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. He tried to sound casual. "You ever serve overseas?" Ray didn't look up. "Everyone serves overseas eventually." "Fallujah?" He pressed. That got her attention. Her hands froze mid-motion, just for a heartbeat. Then she resumed cleaning, slower this time. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Just heard some stories," Ryan said. "About a sniper." "A long shot. Thought maybe you knew something." Ray placed the cleaned barrel on the table and finally looked him in the eye. "Stories are for people who weren't there, Sergeant." Her tone wasn't angry. It was firm, final. Ryan raised his hands in surrender. "Fair enough." She went back to work, but something had shifted in her expression. The calm exterior cracked, if only for a moment, revealing something deeper, pain, maybe, or memory. Over the next few days, the whispers turned into reverence. Every time she stepped onto the range, conversations died mid-sentence. Even the instructors watched her like they were seeing something rare, a living myth. But Ray didn't seem to notice. She trained, cleaned, taught, and left. Never stayed to chat. Never boasted. Ryan began to realize that she didn't care what people said. She didn't crave the attention. She avoided it. Whatever had happened in her past, it wasn't glory that haunted her. It was something else. That Friday, during evening cleanup, Ryan found her sitting alone by the range, the Barrett laid across her lap, dismantled piece by piece. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky orange and red. He sat beside her without a word. For a long time, they just listened. The wind, the faint echo of distant gunfire, the creak of the rifle's frame, cooling in the air. Finally, he asked, "You ever regret it?" She glanced at him, brow furrowed. "Regret what?" "Being that good," he said. "Having people look at you like a ghost story." She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Skill isn't the problem," she said softly. "Memory is." He frowned. "Meaning?" "You can train your body to do almost anything," she said, picking up the rifle's bolt carrier, wiping it down with slow precision. You can slow your heart, calm your breathing, even forget fear. But you can't train your mind to forget what happens after you pull the trigger. Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it was heavy. Too heavy for someone who hadn't seen the things she'd seen. Ryan didn't press further. He didn't need to. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in his head again and again. You can't train your mind to forget. He thought about all the soldiers he'd known who carried ghosts, faces they'd never forget, decisions they'd never undo. But something told in Ray carried more than that. She wasn't haunted by who she'd lost. She was haunted by how she'd survived. By the weekend, the entire battalion had heard the rumor in full detail. 3,247 meters, confirmed. Single shot. No spotter. Enemy sniper eliminated before he even saw her. Saved a platoon. Some soldiers doubted it. Others swore by it. But Ryan had stopped questioning. Every time he saw her shoot, every time he heard that calm, deliberate voice on the range, he knew it wasn't just a story. It was the truth. Still, he noticed something strange. The higher-ups never mentioned her. Her name was never called at briefings. Her record was never displayed. It was as if the army itself was trying to keep her invisible. And that made him wonder, what kind of mission left a soldier with a record like that, and orders to stay silent? Late Sunday night, Ryan found her again, this time at the observation deck overlooking the training grounds. She was sitting alone, her Barrett beside her, the moon reflecting off the long steel barrel. "You ever think about it?" he asked, sitting next to her. "About what?" "Taking that shot," he said. "The one everyone whispers about." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were on the horizon, far away, lost in some memory. Then she said quietly, "Every day." Ryan waited, but she didn't elaborate. Finally, she added, "It wasn't about distance. It was about choice. And once you make it, you don't get to go back." He wanted to ask what she meant, but her tone told him not to. So he just sat there, the silence stretching between them, heavy, endless, and full of everything she didn't say. When she stood to leave, she paused, glancing down at him. "You shouldn't believe everything you hear, Sergeant," she said softly. "But you shouldn't ignore it either." And then she was gone, vanishing into the night like the ghost they all said she was. That was the moment Ryan realized something important. The story wasn't just about a record-breaking shot or an extraordinary soldier. It was about the burden of perfection, the quiet price people like her paid for being better than everyone else. The whispers weren't lies. They were fragments of truth, carried by soldiers who didn't have the full picture. And Ryan? He wasn't chasing answers anymore. He was chasing understanding of her, of that impossible call, and of what kind of past created a person like Ray Reynolds. Because deep down, he knew one thing for sure, whatever her story was. It wasn't over yet. The air was still that morning, too still. Not even the wind dared to move as the long-range marksmanship competition kicked off at Fort Bragg. Rows of shooters lined the range, their rifles gleaming under the Carolina sun. The annual test wasn't just tradition. It was pride. Snipers, spotters, and marksmen from across the base came to prove who had the steadiest hands and the coldest nerves. Ray Reynolds had never competed before. Most soldiers didn't even know if she was eligible. She worked in the armory, fixed weapons, trained recruits. That was it. But when her name appeared on the list that morning, Corporal R. Reynolds' heads turned. "She's competing?" Someone whispered. "No way. She's not even assigned to a sniper platoon." "She doesn't have to be," another voice muttered. Ryan Cole watched her from the sidelines, coffee in hand. The whispers didn't surprise him anymore. What surprised him was the way she looked, calm, distant, her focus entirely on the Barrett she was setting up at her station. The Barrett wasn't just a rifle. It was a challenge. Most shooters preferred lighter bolt actions like the M2010 or the MRAD, but Ray had chosen the beast, the .50 cal monster, known for its recoil and its roar. She positioned it on the bipod, adjusted the scope, and laid flat against the mat. Every movement was exact, controlled. She didn't glance at anyone, didn't look for approval. She was in her own world. Ryan stepped closer, standing behind the safety line. He'd seen her shoot before, but today felt different. Today, she wasn't teaching or training or maintaining discipline. Today, she was competing. The announcer's voice crackled through the speakers. First stage minus 1,000 meters. Wind variable, 5 knots west. Shooters ready. A dozen rifles lifted into firing position. The command echoed, "Fire!" The range exploded with sound, thunderous shots rolling one after another. Ryan watched as spotters called impacts. Targets blinked red and green downrange. Most shooters hit within the margin. Some missed completely. Ray didn't fire. She lay still, breathing slow, eyes on the mirage, dancing above the sand. 10 seconds passed. Then 15. Finally, the Barrett barked once, a single deep roar that silenced every other sound. Clang. A hit. Dead center. Impact. 1,000 meters. Bullseye. The spotter shouted, voice almost disbelieving. The men nearby exchanged looks. She hadn't rushed. She hadn't second-guessed. She had simply waited until the world aligned with her breathing. The next target appeared, 1,600 meters. She reloaded, adjusted windage by instinct, and squeezed again. Another clang. By the time they reached 2,000 meters, half the shooters were missing. The crosswinds were unpredictable, gusting across the range like invisible waves. But Ray, she didn't flinch. She fired, paused, recalibrated, fired again. Every shot sang true. Ryan couldn't take his eyes off her. Her composure was unnatural. Most snipers had a tell, a nervous twitch, a clenched jaw, the subtle tremor of adrenaline. Ray had none of that. Her pulse seemed to move at half speed, her breathing measured and perfect. When the final stage came, 2,400 meters, extreme distance, everyone stopped shooting to watch her. The announcer hesitated before calling it. Target is beyond visibility for standard optics. Shooters may adjust elevation. A few of the seasoned marksmen exchanged doubtful looks. That kind of shot required more than skill. It required instinct, something that couldn't be taught. Ray slid the bolt home, leaned in, and exhaled slowly. Ryan noticed her eyes, not cold, not angry, just focused. A stillness he'd only ever seen in combat veterans right before chaos hit. The Barrett's recoil thundered through the valley. One shot. Everyone waited. 5 seconds. 6, 7. Then, faint, distant, and unmistakable clang. The entire line went dead silent. Impact. 2,400 meters, the range officer confirmed, disbelief in his voice. Someone whistled low. Another muttered, "That's not even human." Ray simply ejected the shell, set the rifle down, and began cleaning it. To her, it wasn't a victory. It was just another exercise. Ryan shook his head in awe. "She's not competing," he murmured to himself. "She's remembering." When the results were posted, her score wasn't just the highest. It was nearly double the second place. The margin was unheard of. Commanders came down to watch the replays, thinking maybe the sensors were wrong. They weren't. By evening, the base was buzzing. Soldiers whispered her name like a secret. Reynolds, Ray, the woman with the Barrett. Some called her lucky. Others called her terrifying. But no one, not a single person, doubted her anymore. Ryan found her in the locker room after the event, cleaning her rifle as usual. The golden light of sunset streamed through the window, glinting off the Barrett's barrel. "You broke every record on that range," he said. She didn't look up. "Records are numbers, Sergeant." He smirked. "Those numbers mean something." She finally glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Not to the people who never made it home." The words hit harder than a gunshot. He realized she wasn't proud. She was haunted. The competition wasn't about proving skill. It was about confronting ghosts. Ryan sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. "You really made that 3,247-meter shot, didn't you?" Ree's hands stilled. The rag she was using to clean the rifle trembled slightly. She didn't answer. He pressed gently. "You saved people that day. You know that, right?" Her eyes flicked up, and for the first time, he saw something break through the calm. "You ever take a life that far away, Sergeant?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. She nodded once. "You don't see their face. You don't hear them. You just watch through glass as the world goes silent." She looked away. "And you spend every night wondering if the silence was worth it." Ryan didn't know what to say. The room felt heavy, the air thick with a truth no one else could understand. Finally, she stood, slinging the Barrett over her shoulder. "The shot doesn't define me," she said softly. "It reminds me." "Of what?" "That distance doesn't make it easier." Later that night, the award ceremony was held in the mess hall. Officers gave speeches, certificates were handed out, and applause echoed through the room. When Ree's name was called, she didn't go up. Ryan nudged her gently. "They're calling you." "I know," she said. "You earned it. I didn't come for that." Before he could argue, she stood quietly and slipped out the side door. Outside, the night air was cool and still. She walked back toward the range, the sound of celebration fading behind her. The moon hung over the field like a watchful eye. She stopped at the same mat where she'd fired earlier, looked downrange, and whispered something only the wind could hear. Ryan followed her out a few minutes later, keeping his distance. He didn't interrupt. He just watched as she knelt beside her rifle again, staring into the darkness, the same direction her bullet had flown hours earlier. Whatever she saw out there, it wasn't victory. It was memory. When she finally turned to leave, her voice carried softly through the night. "Records fade, Sergeant. What matters is why you pulled the trigger." Back in his bunk, Ryan couldn't sleep. The sound of that single gunshot echoed in his mind. It wasn't just the noise. It was what it represented. Mastery, control, sacrifice. He finally understood why she never bragged, never smiled after shooting. For her, every bullet carried weight. Every trigger pull was a question she could never unask. Still, he couldn't deny what he'd witnessed that day. The whispers had been true. The legends were real. Ray Reynolds wasn't just a sniper. She was the embodiment of precision, and the ghost of every shot ever fired in silence. The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the tin roof of the base workshop. The smell of oil, metal, and wet earth filled the air. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind that usually passed without notice, but for Ryan, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Ever since the shooting competition, he hadn't been able to shake the image of Ray at the range motionless, calm, eyes locked on something only she could see. He'd seen plenty of soldiers shoot before. He'd seen arrogance, nerves, triumph, and fear. But what he saw in her was something deeper, something buried. He walked into the workshop, coffee in one hand, her dog tags in the other. She'd forgotten them the day before, and he figured it was a decent excuse to talk. She was there, of course. Same stool, same posture, the Barrett laid out in perfect order on the table. The weapon gleamed under the dim light, each part clean to perfection. "You forget something," he said, setting the tags down beside her. Ray glanced at them, then back to the scope she was polishing. "Thanks," she said quietly. "You ever take a day off?" "Days off are for people who can sleep." He studied her for a moment. There was no sarcasm in her tone, just plain fact. The way she said it, calm, almost detached, sent a shiver through him. "Ray," he said, sitting down across from her, "you've got half the base trying to figure you out. You outshot everyone, including our best snipers. You've got a confirmed long-distance record that nobody's even come close to. And you act like it doesn't mean a damn thing." "It doesn't," she replied, still working. "Then tell me why." She finally stopped. Her hands rested on the rifle's frame, fingers tracing the smooth black metal like she was touching something alive. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "You really want to know?" Ryan nodded. She leaned back, staring at the floor, and for the first time, he saw her walls crack, just slightly. "It was Fallujah," she began. 2017. We were part of a joint task force. Our mission was overwatch for a civilian extraction, an aid convoy pinned down near the industrial district. I was a spotter back then. My partner, Sergeant Mike Dawson, was the shooter. Her voice was steady at first, but her eyes shifted, not to him, but to some faraway place only she could see. We were perched on a rooftop, about 3 clicks from the convoy's last known position. Intel said insurgents had RPGs, possibly technicals. We were supposed to provide overwatch and take out any heavy weapons. Simple mission, in theory. She exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of her neck. But things went wrong fast. The convoy took fire from a building we couldn't get eyes on. Dawson tried to spot, but visibility was trash. Sandstorm rolling in, comms going static. Then she paused, her jaw tightening. Then I saw movement on the thermal. Rooftop across the city. A sniper, high caliber, aiming right at the convoy. They were going to wipe everyone out. Ryan's grip tightened on his cup. "What did you do?" She looked at him, eyes like glass. "I called it in." But command didn't respond. Dawson tried to reposition, but the roof was collapsing under us. I had seconds. I took the rifle. "You weren't the primary." "No," she said softly. "But that didn't matter." Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. "I had the Barrett." The wind was cutting at 12 knots, variable. The distance was over 3 kilometers, too far for a clean read. But the convoy had children inside, civilians, and that shooter? She shook her head. He was steady. He knew exactly what he was doing. She lifted her gaze, meeting Ryan's. "You ever feel time stop, Sergeant?" He swallowed. "Once, in Afghanistan." She nodded faintly. "Then you know what it's like. The world goes silent. You don't hear your heartbeat. You don't even think. You just see." I adjusted 98 MOA elevation, 3 clicks windage. And then I pulled the trigger. The rain outside pounded harder, filling the silence that followed. The round took almost 4 seconds to reach him. 4 seconds. She let out a bitter laugh. "You'd think that's nothing, but it's a lifetime." I watched him through the scope. I watched the round travel across the desert, and when it hit, she didn't finish. Ryan didn't push. After a long pause, she said, "Command confirmed the kill later. 3,247 meters. Longest confirmed shot by a female in U.S. history. They called it legendary. Said it saved lives. But what they never tell you is what happens after." Her tone hardened. After, you start counting seconds in your sleep. You remember the delay, the moment between pulling the trigger and watching someone disappear. You start wondering what his name was. If he had a family. If someone else watched him the way you did. Ryan sat in silence. The weight of her words pressed heavy against the room. I didn't celebrate, she said. I didn't even smile. Dawson did. He said we'd made history. But when I looked through that scope again, I realized something. What? She looked up, eyes dark and distant. That distance doesn't make you safer. It just makes it easier to forget you're human. The rain slowed to a drizzle. The smell of wet sand and oil thickened the air. Ryan finally spoke. You saved lives, Ray. You know that. She nodded slowly. I know. But the shot still echoes. They sat there in silence for a while, the only sound the soft tick of cooling metal and distant thunder. After a few minutes, Ryan asked, What happened to Dawson? Ray hesitated. He didn't make it back. The roof gave out before extraction. I was the only one left. Ryan's chest tightened. You were alone? She nodded once. Alone, pinned down, out of ammo, and waiting for air support that never came. That's where the record came from. Desperation, not glory. She wiped her hands on a rag, her movements mechanical, precise. After that mission, they wanted to promote me. Give me medals. I refused. You don't take credit for surviving what others didn't. Ryan swallowed hard. He'd heard a lot of war stories, but this one hit differently. Not because of the record or the distance, but because of what it cost her. When she finally stood up and slung her rifle over her shoulder, she said, You wanted to know the story. Now you do. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. As she walked toward the door, she paused and glanced back. You ever wonder why some people shoot to kill and others shoot to protect? Ryan frowned. There's a difference? She gave a small, almost sad smile. One of them sleeps at night. Then she left. Ryan sat alone in the workshop long after she was gone, the dog tags still glinting on the table. He picked them up and stared at the engraved name, Reynolds, R03 Sniper, and felt something shift inside him. He finally understood why she treated the Barrett like it was more than a weapon. To her, it wasn't just steel and gunpowder. It was memory. A link to the moment she crossed an invisible line, from soldier to survivor. That night, he couldn't shake her words. Distance doesn't make you safer. The next morning, he found her back at the range, alone again, the Barrett resting against her shoulder. Without a word, he joined her. Spotter? She asked. Yeah, he said. Winds 10 knots east. Copy. She smiled faintly. Let's see if the ghosts still listen. The rifle thundered, the sound rolling across the base. And for the first time, Ryan didn't hear war in the shot. He heard peace. 2 weeks had passed since that stormy afternoon in the armory. The whispers on base had finally started to die down, but one name still lingered like smoke, Ray Reynolds. Rumor had it that the higher-ups were reviewing her file again. Ryan didn't know why, until that morning, when a black Suburban rolled through the base gates and parked directly outside the commander's office. The men who stepped out weren't ordinary officers. Their uniforms were blank, their badges unmarked. By noon, everyone on base knew something was happening. Ryan found Ray at the far end of the range, cleaning her Barrett under the open sun. She didn't flinch when he approached. She just said, You heard? He nodded. They're asking for you. I figured, she said quietly. Any idea what this is about? She glanced up, eyes unreadable. If I had to guess, it's not about medals. Inside the commander's office, the air was thick with authority. Colonel James Donovan, a man known for his unshakable composure, stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back. Across from him, two men in suits watched Ray as if they were measuring her soul. "Corporal Reynolds," the colonel began, "you've been requested for reassignment." "By whom, sir?" Donovan nodded toward the man on the left. "This is Agent Monroe, Special Activities Division. He'll explain." Monroe stepped forward. "We're assembling a joint task unit. Classified operation. We need long-range precision shooters, specifically those with verified records beyond 2,500 meters. Ray crossed her arms. "There are others." "Not with your consistency," Monroe replied. "Not with your control under duress." Ryan, standing near the doorway, could see the tension building in her shoulders. She asked, "Where?" Monroe hesitated. "Eastern Europe. Operation codename Silver Dagger. We've confirmed movement from a rogue cell in Moldova, remnants of a weapons network from the old insurgency days. They've resurfaced with stolen U.S. tech. We believe they're holding an American operative hostage." Ree's jaw tightened. "You want me to make another long shot. We want you to end a war before it starts." The room fell silent. Colonel Donovan finally spoke. "Reynolds, this is voluntary. You've done your part. If you say no, I'll sign it off myself." She looked between them. "When do we leave?" 48 hours later, she was airborne. The C-17 transport hummed through the night sky, cutting across the Atlantic. Inside, the team sat quietly. 4 men, 1 woman, and enough firepower to level the city block. Ryan was there too. When he'd heard she accepted, he'd volunteered without hesitation. "Thought you didn't want back in," she said over the noise of the engines. He shrugged. "Didn't, but I figure someone's got to watch your 6. She smirked faintly. "You'll get bored. It's mostly wind readings and waiting." "Yeah, well," he said, "waiting's kind of my thing." They both smiled, small, tired smiles that said more than words. By dawn, they landed at a NATO outpost on the edge of Romania. Cold air bit at their faces as they unloaded gear. The landscape was gray and empty, the kind of place where even birds thought twice about flying. The mission brief came fast. The target, an abandoned factory near the Dniester River, used as a weapons transfer site. Intel suggested the hostage was being moved within 72 hours. Extraction would be impossible once he crossed into Russian territory. Their job was simple in theory. Set up Overwatch 2 kilometers out, eliminate any high-value targets, and cover the extraction team. Ryan studied the map. "What's our vantage?" Ray traced a finger across a ridge line marked in red. "Here, elevated slope, clean sight lines to the factory roof. Perfect field of fire if the wind holds steady." Monroe nodded. "You'll deploy under cover of night. No contact, no comms except encrypted line. Rules of engagement?" Ryan asked. Monroe's gaze hardened. "If they threaten the hostage, you shoot." No hesitation. Ray met Ryan's eyes. "Copy that." That night, they moved. The mountains loomed black against the horizon as they climbed through the forest. Snow crunched under their boots, and their breath came out in white clouds. Every sound felt magnified. The scrape of metal, the click of a magazine, the whisper of branches. When they reached the ridge, Ray set up her Barrett. She worked in silence, movements precise and practiced. Ryan positioned beside her, spotting scope ready. The factory sat below, a sprawling ruin lit by yellow floodlights. Through the scope, Ryan could see figures moving, guards, trucks, crates, but no sign of the hostage. Ray adjusted her scope, eyes narrowing. 2 tangos on the roof. One's got a radio. Range? 1,872 meters. Wind? 3 knots northwest. She steadied her breath, aligned the reticle, and whispered, "On target." Ryan gave the call. "Send it." The Barrett thundered through the night. The sound rolled down the valley like a storm. The man with the radio dropped instantly. Before the second guard could react, another shot. Silent, surgical. 2 down, Ryan confirmed. Ree's hands never trembled. Her face stayed calm. Through the scope, they watched as the guards below scrambled. Alarms blared. The extraction team moved in. "Contact at the west door," Ryan said. "I see them." The operation unfolded like a clockwork mechanism until everything stopped. A figure emerged from the building, dragging another man by the arm, the hostage, bruised and weak, with a gun to his head. Ryan cursed. "They're using him as a shield." Ree's breathing slowed. Distance? 2,783 meters. Wind? Shifting. 5 knots east. She didn't answer. She adjusted. 1 click. 2. 3. "Ray," Ryan said, his voice tight, "you don't have a shot." "The angle's wrong." She didn't blink. "There's always a shot." He looked through the scope again. "If you miss, I won't." The wind howled across the ridge, but her eyes stayed steady. She exhaled. Time seemed to stretch. The Barrett roared. The bullet flew. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Impact. The hostage dropped to the ground as the captor's weapon flew. From his hands, the round had hit exactly between wrist and forearm. A precision disarmament shot from nearly 3 kilometers away. Ryan blinked, speechless. "Holy, move extraction team now," Ray said into her comms. "Windows open." "Copy," came the response. The team stormed the building, neutralized the remaining threats, and pulled the hostage out. Within minutes, the area was secure. Ray didn't celebrate. She just sat back, watching through the scope until the last American was safely aboard the helicopter. When she finally lowered the rifle, Ryan whispered, "You just saved his life." She shook her head. "We did." The next morning at the outpost, Monroe approached her as she cleaned the Barrett. "Excellent work, Reynolds." "That shot was luck," she said. He smiled faintly. "You don't believe in luck." "No," she said quietly. "I believe in redemption." He nodded, understanding more than she expected. "We'll debrief tomorrow. Get some rest." As he walked away, Ryan leaned against the doorway. "You really think this makes up for Fallujah?" Ray looked out toward the mountains, the sunrise painting the sky in pale gold. "No," she said softly. "But it's a start." Later, alone on the ridge, she set the Barrett down and stared across the landscape. The wind whispered through the trees. She closed her eyes and listened, not to ghosts this time, but to the quiet peace that had followed. For the first time in years, the silence didn't haunt her. It healed her. The celebration at the outpost didn't last long. Missions like Silver Dagger never ended neatly. They left behind dust, data, and questions that no one wanted to answer out loud. Ryan could feel it, the tension, the unease in the air. Soldiers congratulated Ray, but their eyes held something else, curiosity, maybe even fear. Everyone had heard about the shot. 2,783 meters. A disarmament kill. Nobody had ever done that before. And yet, Ray didn't seem proud. That night, as the team prepared for extraction back to base, she sat alone in the gear tent, disassembling her Barrett for the 100th time. The metal clicked and whispered under her fingers, her expression as blank as always. Ryan stepped in quietly. "You should be sleeping." "I will," she said. "When?" "When the noise stops." He pulled up a crate beside her. "What noise?" She gave a faint smirk. "The kind you can't hear unless you've been out there." Ryan nodded. He knew what she meant. Every soldier did. Silence wasn't peace, it was memory, echoing in the dark. After a few moments, he asked, "You ever think about what's next?" Next, after all this? After missions, after the army. What's left? She didn't answer right away. Maybe a cabin somewhere quiet. No phones, no orders. Just distance. He chuckled softly. Distance. Figures. Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. It faded just as fast. Distance is the only thing I trust. Before Ryan could respond, the tent flap opened. Monroe stepped in, phone in hand, face pale. "We've got a problem," he said flatly. Ray looked up. "What kind of problem?" Monroe's voice dropped. "The hostage we rescued. He wasn't who we thought he was." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean? You said he was an operative." "He was," Monroe said, "but not ours." Ree's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Monroe set a tablet on the crate and tapped the screen. The image that appeared made Ryan's stomach drop. It was a satellite photo, the same factory they'd raided. But this time, the image showed something different. Words painted across the roof in white chalk. Large, deliberate letters that read, "Hello, Reynolds." Ryan's blood ran cold. "That was there before we hit the target?" "Intel says yes," Monroe replied grimly. "Whoever these people are, they knew she was coming." Ree's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. "How? We don't know. Could be a leak. Could be someone tracking your file. But it's personal." She stared at the photo for a long moment. "Then it's not over." "No," Monroe said. "It's just beginning." Back at base, security was tightened. Every message in or out was screened. Ray was pulled into a debrief room. It felt more like an interrogation chamber. A single light, 2 chairs, a mirrored wall. Across from her sat Colonel Donovan, expression unreadable. "Corporal Reynolds," he began, "you're aware your name was displayed at the mission site?" "Yes, sir." "You've been with us 7 years. During that time, your record has remained sealed, even classified above my clearance level. You want to tell me why someone halfway across the world knows it?" She met his gaze evenly. "I don't know, sir." He studied her face for a long moment. "You understand how serious this is?" "I do." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You've made enemies, Reynolds. The kind that don't forget. I didn't do it for them to forget." Her tone was calm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper. Guilt, maybe fear. Donovan leaned back. "You'll be under protective watch until further notice. No solo missions, no travel, and no communications off base." "Understood?" "Yes, sir." He nodded. Dismissed. Outside the office, Ryan caught up with her. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You're not fine." She didn't answer. She just kept walking down the hall, past the training rooms and weapon lockers, until she reached the far end, where the walls were lined with plaques and photos of fallen soldiers. She stopped in front of one frame and stared at it for a long time. Ryan followed her gaze. The photo was of Sergeant Mike Dawson, her old partner. "They're saying the name was written to mess with you," Ryan said quietly. "But what if it's more than that? What if they knew him?" Her eyes didn't leave the photo. "Then they know why he died." Ryan frowned. "You think his death wasn't random?" Ree's voice dropped to a whisper. "No death in a war zone is random." That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, the shadows moving like ghosts above her. Somewhere outside, the wind howled through the training fields, rattling the chain-link fences. She got up, threw on her jacket, and walked toward the range. The moon was high, the world silver and silent. She set up the Barrett in her usual spot, loading a single round. She didn't fire. She just stared down the scope, her finger hovering over the trigger. Through the magnified glass, she saw the far end of the range, the paper target flapping in the wind, and for a second, it wasn't paper anymore. It was a rooftop in Fallujah. It was a man she'd never met, but could never forget. She closed her eyes. "Hello, Reynolds." The words echoed in her mind like thunder. When she opened them again, Ryan was standing a few yards behind her. "You really shouldn't sneak up on snipers," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I figured if you were going to pull an all-nighter, you'd need company." She lowered the rifle. "You ever wonder if the past is just waiting for us to look away?" "Every day," he said. "But you can't let it own you." She looked at him, and for the first time, her voice cracked. "It already does." The next morning, Monroe returned with new intel. "We traced the message," he said, sliding a folder onto the table. "Turns out it was written after the firefight, not before." Ryan frowned. "So they knew our timing." "Worse," Monroe said. "They were watching." He clicked a button, and a grainy drone photo appeared, a figure standing on a ridge opposite their position, holding binoculars. "Who is it?" Ray asked. Monroe zoomed in. The image was blurry, but the outline was clear. Tall, lean, wearing desert fatigues. And then Monroe said the words that froze the room. "We believe it's Mike Dawson." Ryan blinked. "That's impossible." "He's dead." Ree's throat went dry. "No," she whispered. "He's gone." Monroe shook his head. Body was never recovered. Satellite picked up movement, matching his last coordinates 2 years after Fallujah. "We thought it was a glitch, but now—" Ree's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "If he's alive—" "We don't know that yet," Monroe said quickly. "But whoever that was, they wanted you to see it." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "If it's him, then this isn't about revenge." Ryan stared at her. "Then what is it?" Ray looked at the photo one last time. "It's about unfinished orders." That night, the base was quiet. Too quiet. The lights flickered once, then again. Power outage. Standard protocol said to stay put. But Ryan knew where she'd go. He grabbed his jacket and ran to the range. Sure enough, Ray was there, her Barrett in hand, staring at the tree line beyond the fences. "You think he's out there?" Ryan asked. She nodded slowly. "I know he is." "How?" "Because ghosts don't leave messages." A breeze stirred the grass. Somewhere far off, a single light flickered in the darkness. A signal, faint and deliberate. Ryan's breath caught. "That's not base lighting." "No," she said quietly. "That's an invitation." She chambered around, the sound sharp in the night. Ryan grabbed her arm. "Ray, wait." She looked at him, eyes cold and clear. "If it's Dawson, I need to know why he's still alive." And before he could stop her, she stepped into the darkness, the Barrett slung over her shoulder, the wind carrying her words like a promise. Some shots never stop echoing. The forest beyond the base was alive with shadows, though no creature stirred. Ray Reynolds moved like a phantom, the Barrett slung over her shoulder, her boots barely making a sound on the wet earth. Ryan Cole followed close behind, every step deliberate, every breath measured. The signal, a single flickering light visible from the ridge, had guided them here. Satellite imagery suggested movement days prior, but no drone or patrol had gotten close enough to confirm anything. That light wasn't random. It was intentional, personal. Ray stopped at a ridge overlooking a valley. Below, the old industrial complex sprawled like a skeleton in the night. The faint glow of lanterns illuminated the roofs. Shadows moved among them. She crouched, taking in the sight. "Multiple targets," she whispered. Minimal cover. We need overwatch. Ryan scanned the area with binoculars. It's a trap. Ray didn't flinch. Everything's a trap until proven otherwise. She set the Barrett on a bipod, adjusting the scope. Every motion was precise. Decades of instinct compressed into seconds. Her eyes, usually calm, flickered with something else tonight. A hunger for answers, for closure. Range? Ryan asked. 2,600 meters. Winds variable. 3 to 5 knots west. Ryan's stomach clenched. You're going to take a shot before we even know who's alive down there? Ray exhaled. Not a kill. A recon shot. Before Ryan could protest, she squeezed the trigger. The .50 caliber round roared across the valley, striking a roof and sending a plume of dust into the night air. Movement below froze. One figure rose slightly, scanning, then vanished into the shadows. Ray adjusted again. Another shot, precise, aiming for a small metal container in the courtyard. It's toppled. Nothing more. They're hiding, Ryan muttered. Or they're waiting, Ray said, eyes scanning the tree line. Either way, we're not alone tonight. Hours passed. The forest was silent, except for the occasional snap of twigs underfoot. Satellite lights tracked movement below, but nothing approached them. Ray didn't rest. She checked her ammunition, adjusted the scope, recalibrated for wind gusts. Every flicker in the shadows, every distant rustle, was noted. Finally, a man emerged from the complex. Tall, lean, moving cautiously. Ryan froze. The man's gait, familiar, impossible, made his blood run cold. Dawson? He whispered. Ree's eyes locked on the figure. Impossible, she said. But there was no denying it. The same lean frame, the same deliberate movements, the way he held his hands. Dawson. Alive. Ryan's voice cracked. He's alive. She exhaled slowly. I knew it. The two moved closer, using the forest as cover. They watched Dawson coordinate with several other men, clearly a well-trained unit. But something was off. He wasn't hostile. Not yet. Ray whispered. He's not the same Dawson I knew. Too controlled, too careful. He's been trained. Ryan frowned. By who? Before she could answer, Dawson's eyes flicked up, directly at them. For a split second, she thought he recognized her. His stance froze. Then he turned away and motioned to the other men. No alarm, no gunfire. They're waiting for something, she said. Ryan tightened his grip on his binoculars. Or someone? Someone, she echoed. They followed him cautiously. Every shadow, every tree became a potential threat. But as dawn approached, Dawson's unit stopped near an abandoned warehouse. He entered first, alone. Ray exhaled. This is it. Ryan glanced at her. You sure you want to do this? She nodded. I need answers. They descended quietly, using every piece of terrain to remain unseen. Inside, the warehouse was dark, echoing with the faint hum of electricity. Boxes lined the walls. Crates were stacked high. And in the center, a table covered with maps, laptops, and documents. Dawson stood over it, consulting something. Then he turned. And for the first time, he looked directly at her. Time froze. Ray, he said, his voice low, controlled, but unmistakably his. She stepped forward. Mike, his eyes widened slightly, surprise. But then his face hardened. You shouldn't be here. I could say the same, she replied. Why are you alive? What's going on? He shook his head. You don't understand. I couldn't come back. Not then. Not ever. Not even to explain? Not even to explain. he repeated, softer this time. The mission. It went wrong. Extraction failed. The unit thought I was dead, and I had to stay dead. Ree's hand instinctively went to her Barrett, but she didn't raise it. You stayed alive. And now? He gestured to the maps and screens. Now I'm stopping a network that's more dangerous than anything we faced in Fallujah. Rogue mercenaries, stolen weapons, and now, a man who wants revenge for what happened back then. Her pulse quickened. They knew about me? They knew about the shot, he said. The one that saved lives and haunted me. They knew your name before we even left the base. They're waiting for you. Ryan stepped closer, whispering, That light, it was a lure. Dawson nodded. And you fell right into it. But now we can turn it around. Ree's eyes hardened. Then tell me everything, now. Dawson explained the operation. After Fallujah, remnants of the insurgent network had gone underground. They knew about her skill, about the Barrett, about the kill record. They were using it to manipulate, bait, and intimidate U.S. operatives. Every mission since had been a test, every movement observed. And the hostage in Moldova? A distraction. Ryan's stomach turned. So this was bigger than a rescue? Much bigger, Dawson said. They're building an arsenal. And they know you're the only one who can reach targets from this distance reliably. Ree's jaw clenched. Then it ends tonight. Dawson nodded. With the information we've gathered, we can hit multiple sites simultaneously. But I need you, Ray. Your shot, your range, it's the only way to ensure success without risking lives. Ryan swallowed. And the risk to her? Dawson hesitated. High, but she's the only one who can do it. Ray looked at him calmly. Then we finish this. No excuses. The plan was set. By dusk, the team would hit 3 separate locations, all coordinated to neutralize weapons, capture operatives, and finally dismantle the network. Ree's role, Overwatch sniper, covering the team from nearly 3 kilometers out. As night fell, she set up the Barrett once more, checking every adjustment, every scope calibration, every click of windage. Ryan joined her, spotting. Dawson moved with the unit below. Distance? Ryan asked. 2,942 meters, she said. Wind variable? 3 to 6 knots northwest. Watch the mirage. Ryan nodded. You ready? She exhaled slowly, squeezing the bipod into the earth. Always. The first shot flew. Silence, then confirmation, impact. The second shot, another. Precision, surgical. The third, a minor obstacle eliminated. Below, the team advanced. Communication was minimal. Each shot, each movement, orchestrated like a deadly ballet. Finally, the network was neutralized. Weapons seized. Operatives captured. And in the chaos, one figure remained elusive. Dawson spoke into the comm. Ray, top ridge. East corner, alone. She adjusted the scope, breathing slow, steady. One target, the man behind all of this. Waiting, watching, taunting. Ryan whispered, It's him. She exhaled. The barrel thundered once more, and the bullet flew, fast, precise, and final. Impact. Silence. The network was broken. The echoes of revenge silenced. Ray lowered the Barrett, hands steady, pulse calm. Ryan approached, awe in his eyes. Dawson stepped forward, nodding once. Finished, Dawson said simply. Ray didn't celebrate. She just whispered, Some ghosts don't leave messages. Some ghosts you have to face. And for the first time, she felt the weight of Fallujah begin to lift. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, casting pale light across the valley. The mission was over. The network dismantled, the operatives captured, and the weapons secured. For the first time in weeks, no years, there was silence. Ray Reynolds sat on the ridge, the Barrett resting across her knees. Her fingers traced the smooth metal, cleaning it carefully, methodically, as if each motion could cleanse more than just the rifle. Ryan Cole joined her, sitting beside her without a word. The wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth, and for a moment, the world seemed at peace. "You ever think about going home?" Ryan asked quietly. Ray didn't respond immediately. She stared down at the valley, where the first light of dawn touched the tops of the abandoned warehouses. "Home?" she finally said. "I think about it. But home isn't a place. It's quiet moments. Moments like this." Ryan nodded. "This counts then." She let out a soft laugh, one without tension or bitterness. For now, back at the base, the debriefing was long and thorough. Colonel Donovan, Monroe, and the team praised their success, but Ray remained distant. She answered questions calmly, without embellishment, without pride. To her, the mission wasn't about medals or recognition. It was about closure, about finally confronting the past that had haunted her since Fallujah. Dawson stood beside her during the debrief. His presence was both grounding and unsettling, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been regained. They didn't speak much. Words were unnecessary. Mutual understanding hung between them like a silent contract. After the debrief, the team dispersed, leaving Ray and Ryan alone once more. "You did it," Ryan said, glancing at her. "Every target, every shot. Perfect." She shrugged lightly. "Precision isn't everything." "No," he said softly. "It's the reason we're alive." That evening, Ray returned to the range alone. The Barrett lay in front of her, cleaned and ready. She set it down gently, almost reverently, and knelt beside it. She closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. Fallujah, the shots she had taken, the lives she had saved, the comrades she had lost. This time, the memories didn't sting. They were part of her, inseparable, but they no longer controlled her. The echoes of every distant shot, every heartbeat in the scope, every moment of tension that had defined her life. They were still there, but quieter now. She whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "It's over." And for the first time, she believed it. Ryan approached quietly, leaning on the edge of the platform. "You really think it's over?" She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. There was no anger, no fear, only clarity. "I know it is. The past doesn't disappear, but it doesn't have to define the future." He studied her for a moment. "You've been through hell, Ray, more than most could survive. And yet, here you are, still standing." She smiled faintly. "Not standing," she said softly. "Surviving." Ryan nodded. "Close enough." They sat in silence for a long while, the wind stirring the grass and the world slowly waking around them. The sun climbed higher, and the valley glimmered with light. Days later, Ray packed her belongings. Her deployment orders were complete. She could leave, return to a quieter life, or take on another mission. She didn't know what the future held, and for the first time, she didn't feel the pressure to control it. Ryan helped her carry the Barrett into the transport vehicle. She looked at him, eyes steady. "Think I'll ever get used to normal?" He chuckled. "Normal's overrated. But you'll find your peace, Ray. You've earned it." She nodded, slinging the rifle over her shoulder one last time. "Peace. Yeah. That sounds nice." The flight back to the U.S. was quiet. Ray stared out the window, watching the mountains fade into clouds, the ocean glinting below. She thought of Dawson, of the missions, of the shots that had defined her life. And she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. When the plane landed, Ryan met her at the base. They walked through the hangar together, side by side. For the first time, they didn't talk about missions or snipers or weapons. They talked about nothing, and that was enough. Outside, the sun was bright and warm. Ray took a deep breath, feeling it fill her lungs. For the first time, she could breathe without the weight of distance or death pressing down. "You okay?" Ryan asked. "Yeah," she said, smiling softly. "I think I finally am." He nodded. "Good, because the world could use more people like you. Alive, not just legends." Ray looked at him, her expression calm but determined. "I'm done being a ghost." And with that, she stepped forward into the light, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Later that evening, alone in her quarters, Ray laid the Barrett on a table one last time. She polished it slowly, methodically, as she had for years. But this time, she didn't feel the weight of every shot, every mission, every life taken or saved. She whispered to herself, softly but firmly, "Distance doesn't define me. Silence doesn't scare me. I am here. I am alive. And I am free." The wind outside carried away the echoes of all the shots she had ever taken, and for the first time, they didn't return. Ray Reynolds, the sniper who had held the longest recorded kill in history, finally found her peace. And for the first time in years, she slept.